Hello everyone, Other Helmet Guy here. In today's topic, I want to dive deeper into the canon versus non-canon theories in Devil May Cry. Shadow Helmet Guy touched on this before in his DMC videos, but I'd like to explore it further because it's a really interesting subject. Just to be clear, this is all theory, not confirmed fact. I'm simply sharing my own headcanon, so take it as you will. With that said, let's get right into it. I've always felt like there are actually two versions of Dante when you look at the lore closely. As the series evolved, especially with everything added in from Devil May Cry 4, the timeline starts to feel like it bends in two different directions. The Dante we see in DMC3, young, reckless, and still discovering his identity, doesn't perfectly line up with the Dante we end up with in DMC2. And then suddenly, DMC5 presents a Dante who feels like he continues from a completely different emotional trajectory. It's almost as if the franchise quietly rewrote parts of his development, creating two branching paths or alternate interpretations of the same character. And here's where my headcanon really kicks in. If you follow the timeline in the order of DMC3 to DMC1 and to DMC2, it almost feels like that was meant to be the original, intended progression of Dante's personality. DMC2 gives subtle hints that Dante is shifting into a more quiet, serious, almost Vergil-like version of himself, still powerful, but distant, standoffish, and carrying a weight we're never fully shown. Maybe it was isolation, maybe grief, maybe never recovering from his brother's death. The series never actually explains it, but you can see the outline of a Dante who becomes the strongest he's ever been while losing parts of himself as a person. But instead of following that darker direction, the series feels like it pivots. DMC4 and DMC5 treat Dante almost like a soft reboot, rewriting his personality, rebalancing his tone, and shifting the focus toward new characters like Nero while exploring more of Vergil's legacy. The modern canon Dante feels like a continuation of DMC3 to 4 rather than DMC2, which makes it seem like the franchise chose one path as canon and quietly left the other behind. So in my own headcanon, there are basically two Dantes now. The older, more somber version implied by DMC2, and the newer, rewritten canon Dante shaped by DMC3, DMC4, and DMC5. And before anyone asks, no, I'm not counting the Dante from DMC. Devil May Cry. That version is a full reboot and doesn't apply to this theory at all, so we're leaving him out entirely. With these two timelines shown here, the path on the left represents what I consider the original Devil May Cry timeline. That route follows DMC3 to DMC1 to the anime series and to DMC2, ending with the more distant, isolated version of Dante we talked about earlier. This path feels like the natural progression of the early series, where Dante slowly becomes quieter, more serious, and more burdened, almost mirroring Vergil in personality as he grows stronger but more emotionally detached. The path on the right, however, feels more like a soft reboot or a newly established headcanon. This route lines up with the way Dante is portrayed in the Netflix series, which a lot of casual viewers are now accepting as their introduction to the character. My concern, and I hope I'm wrong, is that this version might end up becoming the official canon for the newer era of the franchise, connecting directly into the Dante we see in DMC4 and DMC5. If that happens, then the post-Netflix continuity could override or ignore the original timeline entirely. And honestly, that's worrying, because we've seen it happen in so many franchises already. Directors or studios bend the lore to fit a new audience, sometimes without fully understanding the source material, and casual viewers end up thinking the rewritten version is the definitive one. When popularity decides the canon, the original story often gets pushed aside, and the heart of the franchise gets lost in the process. That's my biggest concern here, that a strong series like Devil May Cry might get reshaped not because of the lore, but because of trends, popularity, or outside creative decisions. But anyway, with this newer canon storyline, Dante has been locked into the same rivalry with Vergil over and over, and his personality has stayed almost completely consistent throughout the modern continuity. And when you look at the series as a whole, it becomes obvious why. Fans absolutely love the dynamic in Devil May Cry 3, Vergil's cool personality, his motivations, his design, everything. Adding a strong rival is good for storytelling, but the downside is that a character like Vergil can easily overshadow the main hero. And that's exactly what happened. Because of his popularity, the series kept finding ways to bring Vergil back. He had a tease in DMC4, people wanted more, and by the time DMC5 came around, his return was almost guaranteed. The problem is that this rivalry keeps resetting the story instead of evolving it. It risks becoming repetitive, because we've already seen this conflict play out multiple times. Then we have Nero, the new protagonist meant to take over the mantle from Dante. But again, he's the son of Vergil, which means even Nero's storyline continues Vergil's legacy rather than allowing Dante to develop independently. Over time, it almost feels like Dante is slowly becoming a side character in his own franchise, while Vergil's importance keeps growing. And when you look at the plot of DMC5, it becomes even clearer. Vergil returns, causes massive destruction, kills countless people, splits himself apart just to power himself up, and once again becomes the center of the conflict. Dante's entire role becomes, fight Vergil again. But even then, the cutscenes don't allow Dante to defeat him, because the story needs Nero to step in, gain an emotional power boost, and match both Dante and Vergil. Nero becomes the new, chosen one, while Dante is pushed out of the spotlight. Now Dante and Vergil end up in hell cleaning up a catastrophe that Vergil himself started, which leaves the surface world, and future storylines, focused primarily on Nero. And that's the worrying part. Dante's entire arc is now tied to Vergil's legacy instead of his own. He can't move forward, because the story keeps looping back to the same rivalry again and again. In a strange way, the modern canon has become less about Dante and more about maintaining Vergil's relevance, sometimes at the cost of Dante's growth as a character. And now, looking at the original Dante from the older timeline, yes, even though DMC2 is known for having weak gameplay, its narrative ideas around Dante are actually really interesting. This version of Dante ends up becoming far more powerful than the modern canon interpretation. He goes on more missions, survives more battles, and faces a wider variety of demons and threats. Through all of this, he grows stronger, possibly even surpassing Vergil and maybe even Sparta himself. But this power comes with a cost. His personality changes drastically. He becomes quiet, distant, almost emotionless, and this could be the result of countless tragedies or the emotional weight of losing his brother without ever getting closure. This Dante feels like someone who has fought for too long and carries the burden of every victory. At the end of DMC2, after finishing his mission, Dante rides into hell to settle unfinished business. But it doesn't end there. In the expanded media crossover, he's transported into another dimension, the SMT universe. There, he makes a deal with Lucifer to hunt down the Demi-Fiend. But as the story progresses, Dante begins to respect the Demi-Fiend and eventually chooses to fight against Lucifer instead, teaming up with the very person he was sent to destroy. After those events, his fate becomes completely unknown. His story is left open-ended, with countless unexplored possibilities. And honestly, that's what makes this version of Dante so compelling. He becomes a fully independent character, not tied to Vergil, not overshadowed by Nero, not stuck in an endless rivalry loop. He's a wanderer with unfinished growth, unfinished trauma, and a massive amount of untapped narrative potential. In a way, this Dante represents what the series could have explored if it followed a darker, more mature direction. So in the end, both versions of Dante, the canon path and the original non-canon route, offer completely different possibilities. One is tied to Vergil's legacy and the modern storyline, while the other stands alone with unfinished potential and a far darker future. Whichever one you prefer really depends on what you value in Dante as a character. The rivalry, the legacy, or the independent warrior who keeps walking forward no matter how far he falls. But that's just my take on the theory. What do you think? Do these two timelines both deserve to exist, or should Capcom pick one route for good? Let me know in the comments below, and once again, thanks for watching.